Good afternoon, everyone. I think we're all in. I just wanted to start off by thanking everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. We're very pleased to be hosting this webinar in conjunction with the African School of Regulation on this very important topical issue about battery storage. It's one of the key elements that will support many of our countries in achieving our energy transition and electrification goals. This session really aims to be a knowledge exchange. We've got a panel of wonderful experts who will be discussing some of the issues, especially in terms of policy and regulation that must be considered in order for us to really scale up battery energy storage. We've already started seeing some successes in various countries, from South Africa to emerging policies within Nigeria and other countries as well. So without further ado, I would like to first explain that for all of our participants, we do have interpretation services, which you can access either in English or in French by clicking on the globe button so that you can hear in the language of your preference. We will start off by having some opening remarks from our Director for the Energy Financial Solutions Policy and Regulation Department at the African Development Bank. He will be represented by Mr. Calixte Kambanda. Over to you, Calixte.
Thank you very much, Rhoda. Good afternoon, good morning from wherever you are. Yes, as Rhoda indicated, I'm going to deliver the opening remarks on behalf of my director, Wale Shonibare, who has not been able to join us to this webinar. So, distinguished participants, esteemed panelists, and honored guests, all protocol observed. On behalf of my director, Wale Shonibare, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this pivotal event, the webinar on regulating energy storage in Africa, jointly organized by the African Development Bank and the African School of Regulation. Today's gathering symbolizes our collective ambition to enhance Africa's energy landscape through innovative, sustainable, and resilient energy solutions. As Africa accelerates its transition to renewable energy, energy storage emerges as one of the cornerstones of the energy system's transformation. While the continent currently accounts for just 2% of global energy storage capacity, it possesses nearly 60% of the world's best solar resources. This is a paradox we should address not simply as an opportunity, but as a critical necessity to drive energy security, economic growth, and climate resilience across the continent. The African Development Bank remains committed to this mission. Through groundbreaking initiatives such as Desert to Power, the New Deal on Energy for Africa, the bank's objective is to invest over $12 billion in energy projects, with the goal of not letting anyone behind in terms of energy access, being connected to reliable and sustainable modern energy systems. So energy storage is fundamental to this ambition. It's the bridge between intermittent renewable resources and stable 24 hours power supply, which is key to unlocking Africa's energy potential. Across the continent, we are already witnessing remarkable progress. Just a few examples. In South Africa, the bank supports the 1,440 megawatt hours battery energy storage system initiative, which is enhancing grid stability, peak demand management, integrating 60 megawatt of solar PV capacity. In Kenya, the Olkaria geothermal plant is pioneering hybrid of geothermal and battery storage, delivering consistent power to millions of Kenyans. And in Nigeria, last example, the bank financed battery energy storage system feasibility study which is charting the course for large-scale energy storage solutions to fortify grid resilience and enhancing energy security. So these projects align directly with our mission to support sustainable, inclusive, and climate-resilient infrastructure, energy infrastructure. But despite this progress, the deployment of battery storage in Africa faces several barriers. Just a few examples: high upfront cost and limited concessional financing. Second, regulatory frameworks that do not yet define the role of storage in market structure. Third, limited technical capacity and local experience in deploying and managing storage assets. Last, fourth, perceived investment risks, particularly in untested business models, such as storage as a service or hybrid solar storage power purchase agreement. So in addition to advancing the technology, regulatory and policy framework must evolve in tandem with the technological advancements. This is where today's discussion takes center stage, especially on issues such as developing supportive regulatory policies but incentivize investment and reduce deployment risk. Second, establishing market mechanisms that drive financing for large-scale projects. Third, harmonizing regional regulatory standards to streamline cross-border energy flows and grid integration. This is why the African Development Bank is pleased to co-host this webinar with the African School of Regulation to deepen this conversation around policy alignment, market structuring, and technical standardization. So I encourage all participants to this webinar to engage boldly and think collaboratively as we explore the pathways to unlock Africa's energy storage potential. Together, we can redefine Africa's energy storage future, one that will contribute to sustainable, resilient, and inclusive energy solutions. I look forward to the impactful insights and actionable recommendations that will emerge from today's discussion. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a productive and insightful session. Thanks for your attention. Over to you, Rhoda.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that insightful opening, Calixte. I think now we're ready to really dive into more of the details and the context of this webinar. So to deepen our understanding of the central role of energy storage in Africa's energy transition, we're pleased to have with us Professor Ignacio Perez Arriaga of the African School of Regulation. Professor Ignacio is a globally recognized thought leader in power sector reform and regulation, and his work has guided policy and institutional reform in numerous countries. So we're excited to hear his perspectives on why energy storage matters now more than ever. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rhoda. I'm trying to eliminate the... Okay. Well, thank you very much. After the wise words of Calixte Kambanda, my role is to talk about the importance of energy storage in Africa's energy transition, and I will try to reinforce part of his message. As Rhoda has indicated, this webinar has been co-organized by the African Development Bank and the African School of Regulation. I am the interim director of the African School of Regulation, and the mission of the school is, we say here in this slide, is to build the human capacity in energy regulation that Africa needs to tackle the critical challenges of the energy sector. Storage is not a challenge. Storage is the solution to different problems in different areas to address some challenges, right? So we are going to talk about that and how regulation, I mean, the storage could be, the potential of storage could be unlocked by properly address all these challenges. In the International Energy Agency Africa Energy Outlook 3 years ago, the IEA presented the major African energy challenges. And as everybody would agree, first and foremost is achieving universal access, then improving reliability of supply, making possible that the companies, the utilities will be financially viable, integrating very large volumes of solar and wind capacity, increasing energy investment in energy infrastructures, and moving towards cleaner energy mix. Storage can provide help, support in most of these areas. As you can see in this slide, the battery energy systems, storage systems, are suitable to address some of these challenges. So we can, energy storage could help in integrate larger amount of renewables, can help the consumers to manage their energy consumption and production, and could help in providing the power system with more flexibility, stability, and reliability. These BESS, the batteries, energy, solar storage systems, are versatile, but they are very complex. So BESS can be used to meet many different needs, but at the same time, they have different possibilities and they have different ways of obtaining revenues because of the multiple uses that they could have. And the national and the regional regulators should be adapted, should be made suitable so that storage could attract investment, exploit this potential, and be able to obtain all the revenues for the different services that they could provide. That could be done with markets, and that could be done under regulation, or could be done under an intermediate of private-public partnerships, and we will be talking about that. This is the list that I'm sure that you are familiar with of the uses that are possible with grid-scale BESS. Storage could provide help at the bulk power system level, at the energy level, firming capacity, and being able to balance and to shift the load in different time scales. If we look at the network, storage could provide voltage control, could fix locational problems in feeders, in distribution, also at transmission level, could help in controlling the frequency, black starting the power system after a blackout, could defer investments in networks of transmission or distribution, could mitigate congestions. And when combined with variable resources of generation, such as wind or solar, they could smooth the production, they could help in ramp control, they could correct errors in the forecast of production, they could move the integrated variable generation and storage, they could move the generation in time. And these services, in some cases, as I indicated just a moment ago, particularly at distribution level, could be very location dependent. Some feeders may be congested and storage could help. Some others don't have any problem, and congestion does not have, I mean, storage will not have any specific value. So for instance, we can take a large mini grid that could be feeding, for instance, some residential users, but mostly a large industrial user like a mine. And you can see like the production or load from storage, which is the green area, could make possible that the combination of wind, which is blue, and solar, that is yellow, and diesel, when it is needed, that is brown, could keep during the interval of more or less 1 hour that you are seeing there in the slide, could keep the load stable or following the load during that time, despite the large variability of generation, could keep the frequency stable about very close to 50 hertz, and could keep the voltage stable with some small variations with respect to the target. This is for a small system, a mini grid of about 2 megawatts, not a small mini grid, a small system, a mini grid of 2 megawatts. But if you look at the much larger system, for instance, the entire system of the European Union connected also to the UK, I don't know if you know, I am from Spain, that 3 weeks ago, on April 28th, we have a large blackout that lasted about 10 hours in the entire country, Spain and Portugal. You see in this picture how Spain and Portugal are weakly linked only with 2.8 gigawatts, when the system has more than connected capacity, more than 130 gigawatts, and to the rest of the system. Well, there were some oscillations, slow oscillations that took place prior to the blackout. The final causes of the blackout are still not identified, but we know that these frequency oscillations that took place could be damped, or storage could help in damping them out. Weak interconnections happen in Africa. I am not aware of this kind of oscillations, but they for sure will take place when you try to interconnect power pools and power pools in between them. And storage could help that, could help in the very large systems, could help in smaller systems. Even more when you try to provide electricity in rural areas with off-grid. We know that in Africa, again, these are numbers from the International Energy Agency, standalone solar systems or other type of technologies like diesel or mini grids must provide more than one half of the electrification that is needed, and batteries are present in these solutions. So from the very small to the very large, fixing different types of problems, storage is the solution. But that solution has to be implemented. And as Calixte was indicating, if we look at how much storage has been, how much investment has taken place in different parts of the world, let's look at what happens in 2022. This orange area here is the contribution of the total investment in storage. And we are talking about grid scale battery storage in Africa. So it's very small compared to the weight of the population in Africa, that is more or less 18%. If we look not only Africa, but all emerging and developing countries, again, you have that the proportion here is very small compared to the rest of the countries. So something happens that impedes or makes more difficult the investment in emerging and developing countries. So there are different reasons that that could be brought and that could try to explain. I would focus on something, this topic here, that in less developed markets, in general, there is no route to market, no road to market for many of the services that are provided by batteries. So these services either are not provided or remain unknown and not being remunerated. And the reason is that the complexity of this asset class makes that the business models, the financing, the regulation that must accompany that has not been well developed. has not been well developed all over the place, not only in less developed countries, but the problem is more acute in places like sub-Saharan Africa. So all countries in the world are seeing an increase in the installation of variable renewables, typically wind and solar. And therefore, the role in having all these functions that I have just mentioned of best projects is something that will increase, obviously. But there are a number of complex factors that are interrelated. So one, obviously, is the technological development that is decreasing, improving the performance and decreasing the cost of these solutions, the necessary regulation that makes possible that the business models could happen. There will be agents that would be willing to invest, and how this is financed given the high risk and variability of the income, depending, of course, of the regulatory and business model solutions that have been adopted. Then, therefore, it's a top priority to address these regulatory shortcomings. And as I mentioned before, we can't think that that could be left to the market. Probably it will be very difficult that in the market, without proper regulation, in some cases, the prices even are uniform all the time. And the best could be financially viable. And other solutions could be, on one extreme, just to have that regulated and being invested by the publicly owned company, or you could find some kind of a public-private partnership type of model that I will be mentioning now. So in this document from the World Bank, you can see that they are advocating this possibility of having these public-private partnerships. You know what they mean. So it is a long-term contract between some private party or consortium and the government to provide a service, in this case, to install and to use BESS. And the private party will have to bear the risk of operating and managing the facility and to make money from it, but with some guarantees that will be included in the long-term contract. Of course, that will be a result of a feasibility and cost-benefit analysis that will be made by the government that will require that service. And there are different types of agreement, because this type of animal, this type of solution, is much more complex than when we talk about independent transmission projects or IPPs for solar or wind, because of the multiple possibilities that the storage has. This is not only the situation of emerging and developing countries. Also in technologically advanced economies like the European Union, we are struggling to establish the right regulatory framework to promote investment in BESS. So for instance, you have this document from the European Commission, a recent one, 2 years ago. You have the link there, and they make a number of recommendations to improve the regulation, and I will go through it without being, of course, stopping to explain each one of them. But you can see that storage is both generation and demand, and sometimes it is subject to independent regulations like double taxation, because they are treated as both things and not as the combined thing that it is. The procedures for granting licensing are more complex than for other technologies. It is necessary to design specific network charges and tariffs for storage, because they behave in a completely different, well, not completely, in a mixed form compared to what is only generation, only demand. It is similar to the problem of DERs, distributed energy resources, and the households or the customers in general that could be both consuming and producing, exporting power. It is necessary that energy storage could give be given facilities to participate in markets. And the markets, as you know, it is not only the energy market, it's the market of energy, the market of secondary reserves, the market of tertiary reserves, the market for emergencies, for keeping the frequency stable, etc., etc. So there are a number of services that storage could provide, and they should be acknowledged, and they should have their own ways of remuneration. It is also, as you have seen in the example of the European Union that I have shown, that there are problems that go beyond the borders. These oscillations were happening between the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal, and the northern part of Europe. And the oscillations were going in between those areas. So this is cross-border, not only one border, crossing maybe 7 or 8 borders, the oscillation. So storage has to be adapted to address these problems. Storage should be able to participate in all capacity resources. I know that capacity markets, capacity mechanisms are very incipient in the power pools in Africa, but this is something that is coming, and storage that could make money in those capacity mechanisms. Then, of course, demand side flexibility. So demand could have internally behind the meter, could have a storage that could provide those flexibilities, and in aggregation could provide services of commercial value to the entire system. We see in Europe that is necessary public support. So subsidies. At the moment, Spain, for instance, is receiving $600 or $700 million or euros to develop a number of solar grid scale solar systems, storage systems, sorry, S is for storage in this case. And otherwise they will not be deployed. So at the time being, storage needs in general public support. Electric vehicles have the possibility of playing with storage if they are connected to smart recharging infrastructure. It is necessary a plan of digitalization of energy to have all these facilities, best facilities, coordinated, being able to respond and provide control altogether, as would have been necessary in this large blackout that we had in Spain. And finally, storage should be one of the components of a national energy and climate plan. So they should be included together with other types of technologies of generation, infrastructure, in transmission, distribution, etc. And with that, I will finish my review, and thank you for your attention.
You are on mute, Rhoda.
And I had already started carrying on. My apologies. I was just thanking the professor for that technical overview. I think it highlighted on not only the complexity of BESS itself, but also what is required. And I think some of the takeaways for me was the level of regulation, and also the fact that we do need to have some kind of government interventions in place to really scale up in terms of an incentive mechanism or incentive frameworks that need to be considered as well as we roll out BESS. So now I think is the perfect time for us to move on to the heart of our webinar, which is our moderated panel session that we have. We'll be looking at not only technology issues, but regulatory and market dynamics in order to explore how to really scale up energy storage. This session will be chaired by Calixte Kambanda, who's the division manager for the energy policy and regulation team. And he'll be leading a very dynamic panel of experts. We've got panelists who will be joining us from the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. We have Mr. Damola Omole. We have engineer Shehu Abba, who's the executive director for the system planning at Nigeria's newly created National Independent System Operator. Mr. Max Schoenfisch, who's the power sector modeler at the International Energy Agency. And we've also got Ms. Barbara O'Neill, the manager at the US National Renewable Energy Laboratory, as well as Mr. Mohammed Adel, who's a development director at Scatec. So welcome to everyone, and over to you, Calix, to lead this discussion.
Thank you very much, Rhoda. Yes, indeed, we have a very good panel, 5 people on the panel. Just to add to what you have said, these webinars, the webinars objective are threefold main ones. Understanding the role of energy storage in Africa's energy system. The second one is identifying regulatory and market frameworks to promote storage and investment, and learning from international and national best practices. But as we have seen, the insightful presentation by Professor Ignacio has provided us a very good background to lead our discussion. So without further ado, I will turn to our panelists, and I would kindly request the panelists, while answering the first question, to make a very brief introduction of the panelists, and then answer the question. So I would start with Damola from GIAP, Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, with this question on lessons learned from global energy storage. So we have seen the trends in the presentation by Professor Ignacio. Damora, how can lessons from global energy storage projects be adapted to address the specific regulatory and financial challenges faced by African countries? And the second part of the question is, what innovative financing mechanism or business models can be applied to deploy large-scale energy storage in Africa? Maybe 3 to 5 points, key points. Over to you, Damora. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues, and hello, colleagues. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Damola Omale from the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, and we've been working on battery energy storage projects across continents.
Sorry, Damola.
Yes.
Sorry, just to interrupt you. If you could raise your voice, we can't hear you very well.
Okay, apologies. Is it better?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
All right, I'll speak up. Yes, so thanks, colleagues, for the question. And I think in terms of how regulators can adapt lessons from other climes, I think from Professor Ignacio's insightful presentation, we see that one of the key challenges is the underdevelopment of the market structures on the continent. So one of the key value streams of BESS, for example, is energy arbitrage, which implies that you have time of use tariffs and differentiation when you're using electricity. Of course, BESS allows you to charge when the tariff is low and dispatch when the rates are high during peak times or during congestion. So that in itself creates value for or create a business case for the BESS. And we have seen this work in various regions, including of course the US, and where you have fairly advanced battery energy storage markets, but also in places like India, which is coming up, and particularly in regions where you have high penetrations of renewable energy. So from a regulatory perspective, I think a key part of how that lesson gets, how those lessons get transferred is working along with partners who have implemented these peer exchange with regulators in other regions, capacity building, and what have you, to look at specific demonstrations of how these can be achieved. So we believe peer learning across regions can be particularly powerful. One of the key considerations for regulators is, of course, the tariff impact on end users. And if you can demonstrate that the value of BESS can actually improve for customers in the long run, for consumers, the tariff, I think regulators will be more open to adopting that. And then in terms of innovative business models that we have seen, again, I'll reference GAP just supported a state in India to launch the first DISCOM level utility scale BESS. And one of the key enablers for that project was an innovative financing model where GAP and partners through the BESS consortium was able to provide a viability gap funding as part of the tender. So rather than give the grant to to the winner or to a private developer, the DISCOM was able to issue a tender for BESS, and as part of that tender was able to include the grants that GAP and the Alliance had provided to bring down the cost such that the tariff impact would not be significant. And during the discovery of the process, it actually ended up that the bidded price was about 50% less than what the regulator had expected and had not approved for the previous 3 years. So these are practical cases of where combining regulator engagement, peer learning with innovative business model has led to the development of the first DISCOM energy store BESS system in India. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Danmola. That's very helpful, particularly what you shared about the lessons learned and the experience of GAP in innovative financing solutions, particularly in closing the viability gap. Thank you very much. So I will go now to Engineer Shehu. So the question is, what are the main technical challenges in integrating battery energy storage into existing grids, and how can these challenges be addressed? So we have seen in the presentation by Professor Ignacio how battery energy storage system can help address some grid interruption. So what is your experience on this one? Engineer Shehu, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Let me start by thanking the Professor Ignatius for making a detailed presentation on our expectation. And he has already mentioned what happened in Spain, which is a classical example of issue of, one can say, power system stability. Because before we normally rely on issues of three major aspects of stability, that is the angle, rotor angle, the voltage, and the frequency. But now we have additional converter and resonance stability, which need to be addressed. So while battery energy storage system on one hand can help us regulate the frequency, on the other hand, these actually battery energy storage system has component of controllers and inverters, which in themselves are subject to generating small signal or harmonics into the grid. In the case of, for example, a network like Nigeria, where we have, you are aware, we have frequent instabilities, large-scale blackout. So we have to be very careful at carrying out a detailed studies which thank God the AFDB is now keeping something to do is detailed study to know what are the optimal places and location for the deployment of battery energy storage systems. So the major technical aspect of it that we need to consider actually also include maintainability of the battery energy storage system, outage management. When you want to carry outage for it, how do you really coordinate with the other renewable energy? But of course, already Prof has mentioned how the importance or how we can ramp up renewable energy, intermittent renewable energy like solar, PV, and wind resources. But at the same time, we have to ask a fundamental question. What percentage, at what percentage do we really need to do this in terms of penetration? With the battery energy storage system, do we have a limit or can we have 100% penetration? If we have everything combined into, added with the battery, can we go fully on, which I believe it is possible, can we go fully on renewable? But at the same time, we have to be cautious about the inertia requirement of all these intermittent energy resources that we are talking about. What is the inertia of battery energy storage system when compare it to the conventional synchronous generators? So in my own opinion, I think we have to look closely at the converter or resonance stability issues, as well as to look at other factors regarding the inertia. How can it carry heavy industries when fully integrated with renewable energy? So let me stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Engineer Shehu, sharing the experience from, particularly from Nigeria on integrating battery energy storage into the grid. Particularly key question one has to look at is at what percentage of penetration of battery storage can a grid accept the maximum threshold? And yeah, we will come back to it later on. So I will go now to Max to look at about data analytics and data modeling, power system modeling. Max, we know today you cannot do anything without adequate data and adequate methodology for data modeling. The question to you is, how can data analytics and power system modeling improve the planning and deployment of energy storage systems in Africa? Max?
Yes, thank you very much, Calix. A very pertinent question. My name is Max Schönfisch. I'm a power sector modeler with the International Energy Agency in Paris. I'm a part of the World Energy Outlook team, so we work on the annual World Energy Outlook, which I believe probably many of you in attendance here are familiar with. And my role within the team is to look at and to analyze the current and future role of battery storage in power systems across the world. And you know, before I touch on the question of power systems modeling and the importance of power systems modeling for batteries in particular, I wanted to just briefly again recall the services that batteries can provide to power systems. I mean, this was already very well covered in the presentation earlier, thankfully. So I'll keep it brief. I mean, we have ancillary services to maintain grid stability. So we have, as mentioned, voltage control, frequency control, fast reserves. Then we have, if we move beyond that, so if we think about, you know, the time scale across which assets like batteries respond. We have these ancillary services which are typically supplied on timescales ranging from split seconds to minutes, and we are then moving further if we go along the timescale into time frames of hours to within a day, where we are getting into the realm of flexibility and providing energy shifting services. This is also something batteries can provide very well. And then we move even further ahead. We have, so if we look at the system over the course of a year and the peaks in a system, we have a need for capacity adequacy to meet these peaks reliably. And this is also a service that batteries can provide. And last but not least, as mentioned earlier as well in the presentation, congestion management is also a service that batteries can provide if placed strategically in locations in a grid behind congested lines. So the reason I'm talking about these services is because all of this relates to modeling and to the importance of modeling in quantifying and really identifying the value that battery storage can provide to systems through the provision of these services. So when it comes to ancillary services, I think one can say that is something where batteries are already among the most cost-effective solutions to provide many of these ancillary services. That is certainly something we see in Europe, where batteries are performing very strongly on ancillary service markets. So we believe that in general, deploying batteries for this purpose is already a pretty robust way to boost the reliability of power supplies, therefore also boost access to electricity and support economic growth. And this is something that utilities can do and should do now, even without more sophisticated modeling frameworks in place. Now, beyond that, detailed power systems modeling is more critical to identify the value batteries can provide to power systems in terms of flexibility and capacity. And this really requires detailed modeling at hourly or sub-hourly resolutions. At the IEA, for example, we run hourly models for the power systems that we look at precisely in order to assess the types of the flexibility that batteries can provide. So if you don't do that, if you look at, for example, only annual or monthly or weekly balances, you won't be able to identify the shifting potential of batteries. A high temporal resolution in your power systems modeling is also necessary to identify the annual peaks in the residual demand that you would have to meet over the course of a year, especially with more renewables coming in, and also assess the amount of secure capacity batteries can provide to meet these annual peaks. This is obviously highly dependent on the state of charge of a battery. So in order to assess how much batteries can contribute there, it's really important to identify and to simulate how they are operated across time across the year. So, and then the other factor that I think why more detailed simulation frameworks are required is the issue of grid congestion. So to identify and to value or to see identify the value proposition of batteries for this kind of service, you really need to deploy a more granular model of your grid to identify the lines which are prone to congestion, and then identify the the size of the battery you would need to manage this congestion, and also compare that to alternative options that you could deploy to manage this congestion. And last but not least, I mean, when talking about modeling, as I mentioned, so far, the hourly modeling that I've been talking about is focused very much on the supply side, but we believe that the demand side is very important too. We really what we do as part of the World Energy Outlook too is detailed bottom-up modeling of electricity demand to identify load peaks and also to identify how the load shape can change over time. This is important, for example, when countries industrialize, that can change the shape of the load. The proliferation of technologies like air conditioners changes the shape of the load, makes it more temperature sensitive, and so does the proliferation of electric vehicles with their charging patterns, which are linked to when the vehicles are driven and when they are parked to charge. And all of this, more sophisticated supply side modeling and more sophisticated demand side modeling needs to be combined in a coherent modeling framework within utilities, and of course, ideally underpinned by analytics and real world data from systems operations, from the operation of different assets in the system that we are looking at. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Max. So yeah, you gave us insightful information about the importance of modeling and data analytics, particularly in monitoring up to hourly information details on the supply and demand side management, but also the importance of time scale of the batteries, to know it, to have this information, and also the management of the grid congestion and the value proposition of battery energy storage that can be, derived from proper modeling. Thank you very much. I will turn now to Barbara. Barbara, we know that all these technologies to be deployed, there is a certain role and a key role the regulators, power system regulators, have to play. My question to you is, what emerging storage technologies beyond batteries, so these emerging storage technologies holding the most potential for Africa, and what role can regulators play in supporting this adoption? And then the second part is, would the technical capacity building for regulators be important in effectively integrating those advanced energy storage solutions? Barbara.
Thank you for the question. So my name is Barbara O'Neill, and I am a Grid Integration Manager at the U.S. Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Laboratory. I've been working in Africa on battery storage, in particular in Nigeria and Malawi lately, and it's a pleasure to be here, so thank you. So with respect to innovative technologies that go beyond batteries, before we even get to that, I just want to point out that we do have an issue with critical minerals and sourcing the materials for the lithium-ion batteries that are sort of the golden child right now. It's really exciting to see lithium-ion come down so fast in price and increase its technological capabilities. But there is a supply chain issue that we need to think about. As it is, this sort of 4-hour sweet spot is getting us past the solar day for jurisdictions that have a lot of solar penetration. And it's really inspiring the vision for sort of how much can we get to in terms of renewable energy penetration, which is great to see. And I think that it's helping the utility system operators understand the benefits of batteries generally. But other than lithium ion, we need to consider that there are other chemistries that are going to be I think that the next, the next up in terms of cost effectiveness, and particularly sodium batteries and flow batteries, those are the two that I think hold the most promise now, will really enhance the ability to source materials more cheaply. With respect to utility scale stationary installations, they don't have to worry about that energy density that's needed for the power electronics in cell phones and mobile devices and cars, that kind of thing. So as far as batteries, let's not leave that out and not just always jump to lithium ion, and in particular lithium ion phosphate. Like let's realize there's a lot of work and research being done in these other chemistries. But with respect to beyond batteries, there's only a few, right? And there's no perfect answer, and they're so very geographical and topographical dependent. But I'll mention pump storage hydro, which is obvious. I'll mention compressed air energy storage, which requires, of course, the underground caverns. And then I'll also mention thermal energy storage, which is sort of, kind of the unsung hero and has been looked at for a long time with respect to concentrating solar plants, and how, you just need that medium to be heated up. So maybe it's a molten salt or sort of other physical materials that hold heat very well in order to ultimately generate steam. But really, the pump for Africa in particular, the pump storage hydro play is going to be the best route because there's so many amazing hydrological resources. I know that it's difficult environmentally to site hydro plants, much less pump storage hydro plants. I realize that it's got a huge long lead time, and you want some change faster. But I think that because the battery play is great for the meantime, that there is time right now to look at how we can take some of these dams, some of these existing hydro reservoirs, and create pump storage possibilities, or how we can actually create new dams on some of these rivers in African countries. With respect to compressed air energy storage, which I think is truly low cost when you look at it in terms of its duration and how much power you can get out of a compressed air energy storage, you need the caverns. And we've got some great jurisdictions in Africa, like Morocco, like Kenya, that could actually hold a lot of storage potential in these topographically. So I think that should not be chalked up to like, okay, it's just too complicated and it's too sort of long term. That really, between the hydrological resources and the caverns, like Africa has a great portfolio of natural resources for this very long duration energy storage, which will be needed with the climatic change that we're seeing in global warming, right? Because you're going to have times of drought or times of weather events that will impact your solar and wind provision. So those are the main things with the thermal energy storage. I think that the research keeps going, and we should continue to push forward on that. Of course, the angel investor buzzword is green hydrogen. Everybody's talking about it, and I keep telling all of the jurisdictions that I work in, okay, number one, it's not green unless it comes from renewable energy. And it's not cheap unless you have extra renewable energy. So unless you are curtailing because your solar or wind power, generally, maybe hydropower too, are producing more than you need, more than your demand, then it's never going to make sense to make green hydrogen. I mean, it's already expensive. And then if you're actually generating to use extra electricity to run the process for electrolysis and conversion, it's like out of the range. So for green hydrogen, let's first work on getting to periods of the day when you are at 100% renewable and spilling or curtailing solar and wind energy. And I know it's a sexy term, and everyone's like, oh, the investors are going to go crazy and we can build some pipelines and ship our green hydrogen electricity up to Europe, who is demanding it. but it's just not realistic with respect to that infrastructure unless you have excess. Now, if you look at North Africa, the solar resources is amazing. The wind resource is amazing. So you can actually make that play in places like, you know, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, like all of that, Egypt, like that. I mean, especially Egypt, right? If you can come around the eastern side of the Mediterranean and not have to go undersea in the Mediterranean. So these things are possible, but for the rest of Africa, I don't see it in terms of creating the extra renewables beyond your demand and then creating the green hydrogen and then actually shipping it in containers offshore. It only works if you have great, you know, access to a port that's really nearby for this really amazing solar and wind resource. So I love the idea of green hydrogen in the future, but it's crazy expensive. And what I see is that jurisdictions are going to blue and gray hydrogen as an interim step. And I panic at that. I'm like, this is not a good idea. With respect to batteries, you know, we also have to just think, okay, even before you get to the need for batteries, like if there are other resources that can do what you're trying to do, we need to not just jump, again, not just jump to like the sexy investor buzzword of batteries when we have access to smart inverters. The benefits of batteries that people keep touting is really about the benefits of having access to power and a very smart controllable inverter that can run in modes like frequency watt or volt var to provide reactive power or active power relative to frequency. But so can solar and wind inverters. It's the same smart inverters. They just have to have headroom or you know, access to excess power. So you know, it doesn't make sense to like save the solar and wind energy because it's free. Why would you save it? But batteries too are expensive. So we need to use them wisely and understand that there's amazing uses like in the Nigerian system for helping with grid stability, and they can be deployed very specific to the locations that they're needed, but that sometimes it makes more sense if you have a frequency issue to build a transmission line to connect with your neighbor and have a bigger inertial bank, you know, in the meantime, and allow for geographic diversity of provision of resources. So I'll stop there. Oh, with respect to capacity building, sorry for regulators. There's a lot needed. I mean, these webinars are great, but really working with the regulators and explaining not just technologies, but how to justify them economically is key. And I loved what Professor Ignacio said, which is basically, in the end, you don't have the markets that are sophisticated in with respect to ancillary services. You're not going to be able to remunerate through value stacking of these resources. And therefore, it's going to come down to a cost of service model. Cost of service model is the same as if you're justifying a new generation asset. It's not that much different. We need to get into the economics and look at the project pro forma and say, okay, yay or nay, does this make sense for our system? Can we rate base it? So that education we can do. It's not that complicated. But in the end, yes, you should move to markets. You're not going to be able to price out the value without having those models that Max was talking about. We need to be running production cost models. We need to be running, you know, on all time scales, capacity expansion, production costs, and down to power flow on a sub-hourly basis in order to get the valuation to make the economic justification. Even if there's no actual dollars being exchanged in a true market, you still need to be running the models, and you need to get used to it because that will value flexibility, and that will just flow through your analysis of what you need for your power system going into the future. Thank you. And sorry, I know I took way longer than I was supposed to.
No, it's good. Thank you very much, Barbara, for the sharing the information on different other emerging storage technologies beyond batteries, but also the importance of capacity building. So on emerging storage technologies, you talked about the pump storage, which can be very useful and present opportunities for Africa, particularly with you know, hydropower and hydro resources the continent has. You talked about thermal energy storage, which is still evolving and not necessarily cheap. And then you talked about the compressed air energy storage, and you really gave us a very good information to be careful in analyzing, the green hydrogen deployment, particularly assessing what amount of renewable energy is available in a given country, and other related logistics such as shipping capability, access to port, etc. Thank you very much, Barbara. So I will turn now to Mohammed. Mohammed, we know that any investor would look first on the key risks associated to the investment. My question to you, what are the key risks and opportunities for private sector investment in energy storage project in Africa? And the second part is, can utility, commercial and industrial energy users in Africa benefit from energy storage? And what specific role on this one may play the regulators? Mohammed, over to you.
Hi. Thank you all, and thank you for this fruitful webinar. Hopefully you can keep it on track till everything is settled. First of all, as you all might know that Scatec is a renewable energy developer that is focusing on developing renewable energy projects in emerging markets, and definitely Africa is one of the main focus. And let's say that as a Scatec, we had several references in developing battery storage systems in Africa and in Asia. Mainly, let's say, in South Africa, in Egypt, still under development, and in Philippines. And we can say that each market is a little bit different. South Africa, more or less, is structured. It has at least an initial roadmap of what is their targets in terms of sustainable growth. In terms of, let's say, one of the issues is putting, as example, a battery storage system in their initial plan, which is one of the good things that gives confidence and stability for investors and developers. If we come to Egypt, definitely it's a strategic market, which is more strategic driven. And it's still in under development phases, and still putting the main regulatory framework for battery storage systems. As we are currently, for example, developing now a BSS project in Egypt. If we go to the Philippines, for example, in Asia, it's more of a market-driven structure, more of a spot price. You have several, let's say, several tools that you can capitalize on when you develop and you put the numbers for a battery storage system. So basically, yes, in Africa, there is huge opportunities, especially if we put the targets of renewable energy in Egypt, in Africa, where we're ranging around, let's say, 75 to 100 gigawatt by 2030. Definitely, that's an ambitious target. And the fact of reaching this target is definitely African continent, because it's just doesn't just provide energy, it's more important for economical growth, climate change, and sustained finance directed towards to the continent. So basically, and for this target to happen and to capitalize on the benefits of the renewable energy projects and to reach this target, storage definitely plays a vital role in this. Because as you all know that renewable, whether solar and wind, can have impacts and negative impacts on the infrastructure, and you can be limited so much with the existing infrastructure in Africa that doesn't let you have more room to develop renewable energy projects. And definitely storage, with its, let's say, joker attitude and its several functions that it can provide, definitely plays a vital role in achieving this target. So let's say the opportunity is there, and we all know the opportunity is there. Definitely, it still needs more focus on developing the infrastructure in Africa, mainly the grid. That is, let's say, the interconnection between everything, between the consumption, between the generation and the transmission and the distribution. But at the same time comes a lot of risks. Definitely the lack of grid access, and let's say an advanced established grid definitely is one of the main risks that let's say one of the main obstacles for the development of renewable energy projects and battery storage systems. Let's say one of the things also the lack of regulatory framework, the lack of several revenue streams that can be implemented or be built for battery storage system. It's still more or less learning in learning process with exponential growth and huge potential. As I said, for example, in Egypt, there is a lot of things that is needed, for example, for the transmission company to be aware and to learn more of the technologies and the advantages and disadvantages of the battery storage system and the solutions that it can provide. And I guess the same across several countries in Africa. In South Africa, things are a bit more developed, but there is still more awareness and knowledge that needs to be spread across the countries. Definitely, also one of the risks is let's say. Uh, Bankable reference for specific countries. Definitely, the position and bankable reference of specific countries plays a vital role in encouraging investors and the stability to invest and develop projects, especially the battery storage system in these type of continents, in these type of countries. So this is briefly a summary of the risks and opportunities that comes. But when you talk about, let's say, utility, industrial, or commercial, I prefer more or less to divide it into three main categories: generation, transmission, distribution, and let's say the consumption or the load side. If we talk about each element on its own, in terms of generation, definitely the battery storage system comes with a specific service. Each one of them, the battery system provides a specific service. When it comes to the generation side, the battery storage plays a vital role in smoothing the energy output of renewable energy project. When we talk about the transmission and distribution, it's more of providing ancillary services, frequency support, and voltage regulation. If we talk about the consumption side, it's more of arbitrage side, peak management, and how to benefit from off-peak and on-peak tariffs and structure. That's why when we go, let me start first with the consumption side. Definitely battery storage system is a key unless the energy structure is liberalized and there is, let's say, on peak, off peak pricing. There is more a liberalized market and spot markets, and that's what makes it much more attractive for the consumption side, because that's where they can benefit from storing electricity during the off-peak time and utilizing the stored battery on the on-peak. So that's where it makes, let's say, viability for these type of on the consumption side. But when we go to the transmission and distribution, and then the providing of ancillary services, definitely there is a lack of, let's say, a clear message and a clear framework on the actual needs for the battery storage system. So, and this definitely depends on the several tools and several analysis that can be done on the grid to understand the actual needs and the power flow and how you can utilize the current status, the current position of the battery storage system. On the generation side, as I said, it's definitely viable when it comes directly coupled with for renewable energy projects. And these several projects have been provided and implemented several times, and it proves an initial concept. And that's why I think that's actually should be the main start, is focusing on the generation side, helping coupling renewable, and African countries started and putting regulatory framework to mandate the development of renewable energy projects to be coupled with battery storage system to more or less help the development of these projects reduce its impact on the grid, and at the same time increase the awareness and the knowledge of the battery storage system so that you can have more analysis on the upstream side, and then track it down to the downstream to transmission, distribution, and on the consumption side. So yeah, that's basically from our side, and let me know if they have any questions.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. Very important information on opportunities that present Africa on battery energy storage and the associated risk, particularly on opportunities looking at the amount of renewable energy targets the countries have set in Africa, leading to big number of installed capacity expected from renewable energy. Therefore, opportunities for battery or storage in general is there in Africa. In terms of risk, you mentioned the risk associated to access to the grid, but also very important for this webinar, the regulatory risk, which has to be looked at. And you are talking here then to the regulators who have joined us to this webinar. But also you indicated different importance and different requirements along the value chain, generation, transmission, distribution, and what the role battery storage can play. And one last important I have noted is that to allow penetration of battery energy storage, there is a need to liberalize the market, the energy market or the energy system market. Thank you very much. So now we have come to the end of the first round of the question. Looking at the hour, we still have 45 minutes to go. So we can allow a very short second round of the question to each panelist. For this second round, only the maximum 3 minutes for each panelist, but just to give ample material to the participant. And then after this round, we will go to Q&A. So I will start again with Damola. The question is about the role of partnership. And the question is, in your experience, Damora, what role do partnerships between governments, private sector, and international organizations can play in promoting effective energy storage solutions in Africa? Maybe 3 key points, 3 to 5 key points. Thank you. Damora?
Thank you once again, colleagues. Thank you for the question. So I think us being here already emphasizes the importance of partnerships. We see a number of organizations here supporting and partnering with regulators across. Can you hear me?
No. So you need again to come near your mic.
All
Particularly
right.
at my end, it's raining very heavily.
No problem.
Thank you.
I'll make sure to speak up. Yes, I was saying that this webinar, as an example, is partnership in action. I recognize several colleagues that we've had the opportunity to work with over several the past several years in advancing battery energy storage on the continent and beyond. Again, I reference the BEST consortium that was launched a year and a half or two ago, which was designed specifically or primarily to try and achieve that. It allowed governments, of which we had 16 in total and more than 10 from Africa, come and partner with various institutions, including NREL, who is on the call, but also private sector players, including SCATEC and a few others, to really ensure that regulators, as others have mentioned, start to get the benefit of lessons learned from other regions where this has moved where adoption of battery energy storage has moved significantly. Referencing for example, the IEA report that showed, and Dr. Ignacio's presentation as well, that showed that a very small fraction of investments, both in renewable and battery specifically, are being made on the continent. And part of the reason for that, of course, is the high risk perception, the underdeveloped markets on the continent. So how do we overcome that? We have several players that have experiences across different regions that are able to bring that to bear. So the role of partnerships and alliances is key because each partner brings different capabilities, different understandings, different experiences to the table to inform governments and decisions they make. Of course, philanthropy also has a role, and I mentioned that in my previous response around viability gap. Until you demonstrate the market, until investors are confident that the risk perception is not necessarily an actual risk, and you do that through demonstration projects and the ability for the regulator to actually test these hypotheses, these lessons or these examples they see in other countries. So, I think it will continue to be an important role in creating kind of the right environment for the various value streams for battery to be adopted, and each type of organization, public, private, philanthropic, has a role to play in the partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Zamora. So for this round, I will not summarize what the panelists have said, so just to go very fast. Then I will go to Engineer Shehu. In the first intervention, you talked about the challenges of technological challenges in integrating energy or battery storage. Now, can you share now insights from Nigeria's experience with energy storage, particularly what specific regulatory reforms would be needed to create a supportive environment for large-scale energy storage, whether it's in Nigeria or similar markets? Engineer Shehu, over to you.
Thank you very much, Khalid. In Nigeria, there is already what we call Nigeria Integrated Resource Plan that is now active, which was produced in 2024, where part of the policy is decarbonization and certain, incentive, I can say, for introducing battery energy storage systems. Actually, currently the grid code has to be reviewed because it only stops at power packs models, and especially for the solar PV. And with the coming in of the BESS, we believe both the policy and the regulatory framework need to be thoroughly reviewed, such that more of these resources can be deployed, especially in areas where we lack much of this generation. And also we have certain classes of consumers. We categorize our load demands into certain bands. We have those that we call in band A, who are premium customers that are supposed to take supply uninterrupted. So in that case, at a distribution level, it is not enough to just depend on the grid. There must be certain battery energy storage kept in places not below maybe 10 to 20 megawatts, such that in case of outage, at least for certain amount of hours before restoration of that supply, the consumers on that band A could continuously get their supply without any problem. So I can conclude by saying both the market rules and the grid code of any utilities must be reviewed to include complete integration of battery energy storage system. Though there are other storage systems, but for the case of battery, we need to also know how do we tackle with the environmental aspect of it. Recycling could be part of it. So both the regulatory aspect must address all this. And I mentioned also in case where you need to maintain it, it has to be also stated clearly. Then some incentives must also be added in case or who will own it. Can individuals also own it? It could be another opportunity for small, organizations or certain group of people to introduce such kind of, business-like model. So I think, Khalid, let me stop here.
Thank you very much, Engineer Shehu. I will go now to Max. Engineer Shehu has just mentioned incentives to investment. I have two questions for you, but that you will attend to very briefly. One is from a global perspective, what best practices in energy storage regulation, should African policymakers prioritize to attract investment? But also what African regulators can do to create investment incentives but would make energy storage financially viable? Max?
Yeah, sure. I think, of course, a lot of this has already been covered also by other speakers. So I want to point out what we believe are the most important factors. I think in terms of best practices from across the globe, we need to recognize that a lot of battery storage to date has been deployed in markets that are partially or fully liberalized. So there has been a lot of, of course, there has been a lot of public support, but then there have been opportunities for investors to monetize the services that battery storage can provide through wholesale market, through ancillary service markets, through capacity markets. And in some jurisdictions, we are now seeing trial runs of markets or auctions for local flexibility as well. So there's growing recognition of the need to tap this services or these kinds of services as well. Of course, in vertically integrated power systems, like you find across most of Africa, the solutions are naturally going to be a bit different. So I think what the most important thing, of course, is to adapt regulation to provide, to first of all, enable utilities to leverage battery storage. So they should be permitted to do so, and to capture the full value that it can provide. And it should have an incentive as well to consider battery storage. Of course, alongside this has also been mentioned before, alongside other types of flexibility as well. So battery storage is not the only game in town. There are many options. Battery storage is not necessarily the most cost-effective options, but it should be considered as an option in the long-term planning of utilities, as part of a let's say a technology neutral framework. And this also emphasizes the importance of long-term planning and also providing appropriate signals to investors. So utilities need to draw up long-term plans that provide visibility on what they expect the mix, the technology mix to look like moving forward, and to then translate that into investment plans that can then attract the necessary capital. And another issue is, of course, to avoid a certain, or to open up the regulatory space to avoid certain technologies to be excluded from certain services, to also open up or to make available sources of funding that may otherwise not be available. An example is, for example, in many countries in Southeast Asia, battery storage is typically treated as a generation asset, but then actually it's as we've talked about before as well, it's not only a generation asset, it can also function as a basically as a grid asset or as a consumption, a consumer of electricity. So that needs to be reflected also in the regulation that governs the whole asset base and the permissions and incentives of utilities and their investments. Also important, of course, how can regulators create these investment signals? As I mentioned, long-term planning is important, ensuring a level playing field, but then also, and this has also been mentioned before, international cooperation and harmonization of standards and approaches, because if you do that, let's say across Africa or across parts of Africa, you are increasing commonality and you are making it easier for investors to invest because they effectively know or they once they are familiar with the approach or regulation in one country, they can then build on that experience to also apply it to other countries in the region. So I think this highlights the important role of international cooperation and standardization, harmonization of regulation in creating and strengthening investment signals and also bringing down the cost of capital for storage projects.
Great. Thank you very much, Max. I will now turn to Barbara. In the first round, Barbara, you gave us highlights on other emerging storage systems, but also the need for capacity building in different ways. So now my question to you, from the angle of climate change, how can energy storage contribute to building more resilient energy systems in Africa? Barbara.
Sure. I can be quick. I mean, there's what jumps into my head first is because batteries now are so cheap relative to grid forming and grid following inverters. And it's not, I mean, it's a little bit more money, but it makes sense to go ahead and procure the batteries with black start capability. So when you do have outages that will become more common with different climatic patterns and events, it will be easier to restart the grid, especially if they're deployed in various, strategic locations for being able to create that black start and then do your chain of starting. And, with respect to what our panelists from Nigeria said, the small signal stability or instability issues, that kind of thing, all of these are controllable. So tuning a controller for any inverter-based resource is necessary. And, we're learning lessons all the time, but we have seen batteries in smaller jurisdictions. I'm thinking specifically of the island of Kauai in Hawaii, which is only like an 80 megawatt peak load, but where literally having the grid forming inverter on batteries, and we estimated sort of back of the envelope calculation that you need maybe 30% of those inverters to have grid forming capabilities, but can actually arrest what would be a system-wide power outage when you see sort of the capabilities on top of that. So with respect to resiliency, in as much as it's going to affect the power system with down lines and that sort of thing and climatic weather events, a more resilient system will have batteries deployed. But if you get into off-grid access, I mean, that's a whole game changer, right? Batteries make these microgrids for off-grid access so much cheaper and so much more effective with extending the benefits of the natural resource that you have. Maybe it's a micro wind turbine or a micro hydro turbine, plus some solar, that kind of thing. And so that electricity access will be more resilient if there's a battery installed in the mini grids as well. And again, the price point is getting low enough that it makes sense. But just circling back, there are other tools too. I love when people mention time of use, because in the end, you can sort of lessen your need for something like a battery resource by just changing your demand patterns and having your demand patterns more closely match your natural supply, whether that be through solar day or wind patterns or anything else. So we need to realize that it's just cheaper because it's not capital equipment. It's just changing the rules around how tariffs, I mean, there's two pieces. It's changing the tariffs, right? So the end user tariffs are different depending on time of day. And then the second big piece is to promote them, making people very aware and making that difference like enough to really feel it in the pocketbook, to kind of just craft the demand to match supply. And that can help on fixing the arbitrage issues. And then you still can use things like batteries for all of these grid stability issues that they're truly ideal for, but you don't need huge batteries for that. Sometimes you just need, 1 or 2% to represent your operating reserve kind of magnitude. Thank you.
Excellent. Great. Thank you very much, Barbara. Now, in concluding our second round, I will go to Mohammed, who is going to provide, some insights in forward-looking. So, Mohammed, in the first round, you talked about opportunities and around storage and battery storage and associated risks for the investment. Now, my question to you, looking forward, what strategies can help reduce the high upfront cost of energy storage technologies to make them more accessible in African markets? Mohammed.
Yeah, so I guess there was a lot of thoughts said during the panel here about different strategies that can reduce the upfront costs. But we can say that definitely one of the things is providing grants and blended financing structures for these types of projects. This is definitely one of the first key elements that will unlock the further developments and encourage more developers to work on and invest in these types of projects. This is definitely one of the key issues that needs to be provided. One of the ideas and the things that can be done is that we all know the prices of batteries are now going low. It's getting lower and lower, definitely because of the oversupply that is happening in China. And one of the things that I always think about is we don't want to repeat what's happening, for example, in the PV panels when things were at the end of the day centralized in one area. How we can work on localization and improving the localization and the assembly, even if we start with minor bits of localization, local manufacturing and the assembly. Definitely this will help a lot in reducing the upfront costs. And within the continent several interrelated agreements between the countries within Africa for tax incentives, subsidies to be implemented, increasing the local components for projects that will be issued further on by the government, whether tenders or from the private sectors. This is definitely a key element that will help a lot in reducing the upfront cost for battery storage systems. Another thing also, which is part of capacity building, is not sticking to one technology and try to diversify as much as possible and try according to the R&D and the research and development and the stage of because we all know at the end of the day, battery storage system is still on the learning curve. How we can, according to the demand and the requirements, open up several options and technologies for the battery storage system that can be used for the project. And yeah, I think that sums it all. Localization, technical diversity, and definitely financial unlocking financial grants and incentives that they can definitely help on the preliminary stages in terms of feasibility studies and research and development on the financing and the procurement side. And definitely an interrelated, strong interrelated agreements between the countries that will definitely, because we all know the mineral wealth of Africa and how we can capitalize on this for further positioning in the battery storage industry.
Great. Thank you very much, Mohammed. So, and thanks a lot to the panelists for the 2 rounds of questions and the answers and insightful, very important information provided. Now we have more than 15 minutes for Q&A. I would ask Rhoda to help in reading some of the questions in Q&A. So in case we may not be able to respond to all, so we can continue the discussion via email with the participant. Rhoda?
Thank you, Calixte. And yes, it was definitely a very interesting panel discussion. I think also, given the kinds of questions we've received so far, it really goes to show that the participants were quite engaged in the discussion that we had. There are a couple of questions here. I think maybe we could also group some of them. So we have a question on what could be a conducive regulatory framework for BESS. Is it a generating asset or a transmission asset or a distribution? And what are the respective performance codes and standards that can be set by the regulator? We also have a question that is linked to market liberalization. So that is impacting why investors are not investing in battery storage. So how do we encourage more private investment into batteries? I think we can take a look at those 2. So I don't know who would like to go first in terms of response.
So maybe with the market liberalization. So Mohammed, do you want to take it?
Yeah, sure. And sorry, Rhoda, can you summarize the question again, please?
Yes, no problem. So the question specifically was saying regarding market liberalization, most private partners are not investing in storage. How can we encourage private investors to incorporate batteries into their solar systems to be more sustainable?
Okay, so at the end of the day, battery system is at the end of the day, it's part of a full value chain. And liberalization here is definitely a bottleneck for further developments and direct investments in the electricity infrastructure overall. Definitely, people or countries, liberalization becomes the last resort when the country itself is exposed, has a lot of exposure, and doesn't have so much control on, let's say, on the generation side. The infrastructure is not well established. Electrification is not high. So when these elements are in place, liberalization becomes a difficult track to work on. So basically, yes, liberalization happens, and I think renewable energy is one of the tracks that that helps or gives room for reaching the liberalization structure, and allowing and encouraging more investments on all sectors, on the generation side, the distribution, and the transmission side. This is how we'll actually reach for further investments and private investments in the electricity infrastructure, and accordingly, liberalizing the market will free the electricity prices. It will be more or less on demand and supply structure, and to not be controlled or subsidized. And accordingly, it will free up the market and allow for further investments and developments moving forward for the infrastructure, this infrastructure.
Great.
Thank you very much. I was just going to say, can I add on, since you have the mic already, Mohammed? There was a question that's specifically asking about different business models. So the question is, what do you see as the most promising business model for utility scale storage projects? And are you seeing better returns with standalone storage facilities or co-located projects with renewable energy? And from a development perspective, which approach works best? Is it traditional EPC, IPP structures, or alternative models?
Okay, so basically, when it comes from a development standpoint and investing in and developing, let's say, renewable energy projects coupled with battery storage systems, at the end of the day, you're still governed with, when you talk with utility scale and TSOs, at the end of the day, you're governed with what's their target and what's the advantages from implementing these types of projects, and what tariff structure can be attractive for them. Definitely, at the time being, for current projects we're already working on, coupling a renewable energy with battery storage system is being viable. It's being attractive compared to conventional power plants, and depending on natural gas, for example, or diesel, especially that these prices of the fossil fuels are skyrocketing. So now it's making sense, and that's why one of the things that I said is coupling generation with battery storage system. It will definitely avoid the disadvantages of the renewable energy, plus it will give more room for understanding and capacity building. And definitely all of this will only happen when you have, as I said at the beginning, a financial structure, concessional blended grants provided. It's a whole package that is not, you cannot separate it. This whole package is definitely will make these types of projects viable. And I guess there's another question I didn't answer to it, right? Or was it covered?
No,
Another
those were
part,
covered.
yeah,
It
another
was
part of
about,
the
yeah,
question. Yeah.
exactly. And then if I can now go, there was some technical questions that were raised in terms of resilience. So maybe if I could ask Engineer Shehu, if you would like to address some of these technical questions that we received. So one question was referring to, in many African countries, authorities are increasingly promoting hybrid PV plus BESS projects located near the interconnection network. However, determining the appropriate size of the storage component remains a significant challenge. In your view, what is the minimum viable BESS capacity required to provide meaningful support to the grid, whether it is for stability, firming, or time shifting? And how can this be balanced with the need for project affordability?
Thank you very much, Rhoda. This is a very good question. And first, we have to look at what voltage level is that battery aimed at. If you are looking at distribution embedded kind of generation, it is different from when you are taking it to a kind of utility transmission scale. And then it also differs from when you are just a generator, where you need the battery and solar as a flexibility aspect of it. So we all know that the current trend in terms of the capacity of the battery will be subjected to serious kind of studies. I think in addition to what do you call this? Sorry. We need to do flexibility studies. We need to also add some kind of penetration studies. So a lot of these two studies, when added, will come up with a minimum integration for that particular value. Did I get the question correctly? Or you can repeat it again, please. Sorry.
No, I think you did get it. I think one of the challenges definitely is to make sure that the underlying studies are there and to really look at the issues, as you mentioned, penetration, the reliability, and also the variability, and making sure that you have the right infrastructure. I think that would be the best way to determine the system sizing that's there. And it's not just, one size fits all. So I think that was that's clear.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe if I could ask Barbara and Professor Ignacio, if you could come in. We've had some questions about what kind of conducive regulatory frameworks we can set up. So there was a question that was asking about what would be a conducive framework for BESS at generation, transmission, or distribution level, and what kinds of performance codes and standards should be set by the regulator.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, oh, sorry, do you want me to go first?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay, thanks, Professor Ignacio. I'll get to your answer soon. So, in general, I get this question a lot, and when we're looking at cost of service model, I think that doing a transmission asset classification makes sense, provided that transmission asset is subject to, various grid codes. And if it is transmission connected, like in the US, we like to use IEEE 2800-2022, but in combination with the IEEE 1547-2018 grid code that will help, make sure there's some standardization with respect to capabilities and with respect to, interoperability. So either of those are good. And as far as distribution or transmission, yeah, very just dependent on the voltage level that it's connecting to. But because there's different structures in terms of utility owned operated or IPP owned utility operated in effect, or, IPP owned and operated, which you really don't see in Africa. You'll see in more of these sort of sophisticated progressive markets that can remunerate for all of the value services we talked about. But so in the other two structures, who pays for charging? Well, who pays for charging? It's dependent on who is deciding when it is charged, and that depends on when they're going to dispatch, right? So usually that is the system operator's choice. I mean, that's the whole benefit of the battery. And so therefore they should be the ones to pay for charging. And therefore the consumers, the ratepayers, are the ones who should absorb the cost of charging, subject to prudence and being smart about when you're charging. So again, you're running your production cost model so you have some representation of an hourly marginal cost of the system, even if you're not paying. You want to know when it makes sense to charge, and you want to make sense that the batteries aren't being charged with thermal generation, like specifically thermal for charging, because then that's disincentivizing to the utility. But I've seen it happen in jurisdictions where utilities are actually making more money because they were able to incur sort of a profit on top by basically using their own thermal generators to charge the battery and not using the excess solar. It was just, it's silly. It's silly that didn't, but they were allowed to based on regulatory framework. So many lessons for the regulators to disincentivize that kind of behavior. But with respect to what asset it is, transmission, generator, or consumer, okay, if you don't have the luxury of defining a new asset that is a hybrid of the two, I say of cost of service model, it's easier to kind of just roll it through as a transmission asset. But if your regulatory statute currently has generator assets where they are allowed to charge on a cost of service model, then it is more like a generator for what the benefits of the battery are going to, be used for. I'll stop there. Professor Ignacio, please help me and add to that.
No. I mean, you have given a very comprehensive, and I will say something very general, which is, I mean, if a regulator or a country regulatory authority want to promote and to make possible that the storage that is needed is deployed, I think that the regulatory authority has to define the kind of services that are needed. And also somebody has to plan that. So let's look from the viewpoint of the government. So much storage is needed here and there. And then you could have markets, or you could have cost of service all regulated, or you could try to have some kind of competition for the market. As it was being said before, we don't have markets wholesale markets with prices in African countries. We are having things markets at regional level. So this idea of having differences in prices that we could use is a difficult one. And as we have been discussing also, subsidies are needed. So the markets by themselves is difficult that could provide the services that are needed. So it is possible to have, for some specific services, let's say frequency control or controlling the voltage in a certain area, to define that service, and then to have cost of service remuneration. And of course, with that, you will have that, and you could have a tender to see who is going to provide the service. Otherwise, I think that the solution of the private-public partnership is a reasonable one. There are many diverse possibilities because as you were mentioning, somebody has to make the decision of charging or discharging. Well, it depends. I mean, it depends on the type of contract. You could have a contract by which is the system operator with some kind of, or somebody has a tolling type of service, and then they decide when to charge or discharge and pay a fee to use the facility. Or you could have some payment per capacity or per capacity and energy. So it's very diverse, but I think that the bottom line is somebody defining what is needed, what services are needed, making possible that those specific services are properly remunerated with some competition to enter the market, so to compete and then be paid the cost of the service. Or of course, in Europe, we start having the prices guiding the investment. But for that, you need stable markets with all these services, energy, primary, secondary, tertiary reserve, etc., in place, which is not the case in Africa now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that was quite comprehensive. I think, colleagues, if you'll permit me, I'm just cognizant of time. So I thank everyone for their questions, and what we will do is we'll try and address those and have a sort of Q&A that we will share. Someone also asked about the recording, so we will be sharing the link for that over the next few days. So please be on the lookout for that. We'll send the link to all of the participants so that you have the information and the materials that were discussed today. I think with that, we can now move on to our closing. I'd like to introduce Mr. Charles Gatete from the Africa School of Regulation. And he has the great honor, or is it the challenge, of summarizing and closing this very interesting webinar. Over to you, Charles.
Thank you very much, Rhoda. That's great. It's a big challenge, but it's an honor for me to be here and to have this closing remark. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending on where we are. It's a pleasure also to have this short presentation. It's not a big deal, but let me summarize it on two aspects. But first of all, I want to congratulate and thank the bank, the African Development Bank, of course, and the African School of Regulation for this webinar on this relevant topic on energy storage in Africa. We had a very interesting, productive, and dynamic session. That's very nice. And I want to thank colleagues for this wonderful moderating this panel discussion. So for the first one, you can say we have this discussion on two aspects. First one, we talk about what and how. The first question is what? What is the situation? What is the current situation in Africa? What also is the situation in other continents, in Europe, for instance? Prof has presented something from Europe, some best practices you can learn from them. And this is something that was interesting to learn. The second question was how to fix the regulatory and technological challenges, gap, to foster energy storage as a solution. And the first takeaway of this session is that what Prof has presented, storage is a solution, not the problem. And this is very good to understand that, because storage is a solution to enhance the system, to enhance the grid. Storage also is an opportunity to increase the renewable energy integration in the grid, and also to enhance our energy transition. But this should be done with certain conditions. We have policy, we should have some regulatory measure. For instance, you have to create the link, the route to the market. We have to facilitate and enhance the bankability of the best project. So we could have also, and this is one of the end of this message, we need some public support for that. And this is the first takeaway of this on this session. And we had the opportunity to learn, and personally, I enjoyed the panel discussion. It's very nice with distinguished experts. Thank you very much for all the experts. We learned a lot from your insight with this global perspective, but also national and local perspective with the case on Nigeria. And we learned about this regulatory, also technological challenges, but as well investment risk. And this also is something very important. You have to unlock the investment risk to fast track, to enhance the investment in energy storage. And this came with my second point. The second takeaway of this session is to say that have been said by Barbara, is the need of capacity building. And this is something very interesting to us. We need to add this. I am glad to hear that from the African School of Regulation. This is our mandate to develop some program for capacity building for energy sector stakeholders in Africa. Also in energy regulation, but on this particular topic, when it's a relevant topic like that, we need to have more impactful capacity building. And this is the case for this first one, that we have this collaboration with African Development Bank and the African School of Regulation. This is one state, an example of collaboration that we should enhance in terms of capacity building for our stakeholders. So I will not be long. So let me close here and thank again the bank. Thank you, colleagues and colleagues from the African Development Bank. Thank you, all the panelists, for the insightful intervention. Thank you for all the translator, and a special thank you to our participants. We were, at least at one time, we were 160 participants. That's great, very great. So thank you very much, all of you guys, and see you next. Over to you, Rhonda.
Thank you very much. I think you took that challenge and you succeeded very well in wrapping up our discussions. Thank you to everyone, to our panelists for their expert guidance and suggestions. And I think it really spurred a lot of conversation. To all of our participants, thank you for attending, and I'm glad that you enjoyed it. It shows from the comments that we have been receiving. As I said, in terms of next steps, we will be sharing soon the recording and the materials that were presented. And we will also seek to address all of the questions that weren't addressed during the session, so that you can also take that under consideration as you move on in terms of your work and dealing with this issue of regulation and energy storage. So from myself and on behalf of the bank, as well as the African School of Regulation, thank you so much for attending. And we hope to see you all again in another webinar soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.